Anyone can build software now. The guy that never touched a line of code can whip up an entire website. And the question is how does this change the landscape for the people that did know how to build software? Well, we have this article here, which I think is a great article and I want to go through. I want to start off before I even begin here and say that it's always been that way. I'm sure you can think of an app that's absolutely ass cheeks and yet still has a ton of users. Have you ever used Canva? Or no, Canva's good actually. Have you ever used Canvas? If you've been through college in the last probably 10 years, I'm imagining you've used it before. To be honest, it's a piece of shit. Uploading video files was awkward. It was just an, in general, awkward experience to use. And yet, it is the de facto program because they found the right way to market it to their customers, aka schools, and really just schools. I don't know who else uses Canvas. Discord. I'm sure you're familiar with Discord. Now, the angle here isn't that Discord is bad, but rather it really doesn't improve upon much of the prior gen. It used to have something called Xfire. And we also had Steam Chat. What else was there? There's other ones. TeamSpeak. These ones really did pretty much the same thing Discord did. But Discord found a way to position itself and market itself to a different audience. In that way, software has always been about marketing. Let's get to the beginning of the article. We start off, Block fired almost half the company, 4,000 people, because of AI. Now, I don't know if this is true, but we'll take it for the word here. Atlassian laid off 1,600, Salesforce replaced 4,000 support roles with AI, and Snapchat cut 1,000. Even in the Czech Republic, a small country in Europe where author is from, a local insurance group called Direct announced it is firing a third of its 1,200 employees. Their CEO commented, "Time of playing around with AI is over." And you see this sentiment a lot with CEOs of various companies. And it's really a true statement. The time of playing around with AI truly is over. I would say most roles in some degree utilize AI. You know, if you're a software engineer, you're using AI pretty much with everything that you do. Even if you're a good coder, you're going to use AI. You can think of in tech uses AI in some way. And if they're not using AI in some way, they're probably fired by now. So I do agree with this statement. The time of playing around with AI truly is dunzo. The article continues, software being mostly written by AI changes the job market, but also the software products landscape. And this is how. Point number one, lower entry barrier makes software a lower respect field. It continues here with a personal story. Hold a university degree in two totally unrelated fields, mathematical structures and marketing communications and PR. Oh, what do you know? Something that's related to the article we're talking about today. I imagine this inspired this. Actually, I want to, before we continue, because I do think it's important to make this point, I'm going to go ahead and clear these. Everyone has a different perspective, obviously. And so we're seeing here with this article, this person was involved in marketing. Of course, they're focused in on a marketing lens. Everything this person does, they're thinking in some way towards marketing. I haven't read the full article yet. I'm here reading it with you today. I imagine at some point he's going to harp on the idea that it wasn't like this before, but now it is. I disagree with that. I believe it's always been about marketing in some degree. I think everything is about marketing in some degree. Every invention, and this is the lowest quality gift I could find on the internet, it could be the greatest invention of all time and it gets no users. It can be the worst invention of all time and you still manage to find a way to get people to use it. Marketing has always been important. I think we should get that out the way. Continuing with this personal story, I consider myself a very poor mathematician, but a very decent marketer. However, usually when first encountering me, people show insanely more respect for the former, much more than the latter. And I could see that. I think commonly, at least in the US, we view them like a step above art, which is weird because marketing is part of every business. But a lot of people that go into marketing are people that weren't capable of, say, I don't think that's actually true, by the way. I think marketing is very much a passion. Absolutely, there's people that take on marketing because they actually want to do marketing. So it's weird that we perceive it that way, but that is definitely a real thing in the United States. No one will argue with you about how you are proving Yonida lemma. I don't know how to pronounce this. We're just going to go with that. But everyone will have an opinion on what colors you put on your landing page. I think the angle he's trying to make here is that if somebody feels they understand it, they're going to give it an opinion. And you see this commonly. One piece of advice I always give people, never ask an expert's opinion. If I take a toy to a toy inventor, they're going to have way more opinions than if I brought it to a, say, child. They're going to look at it through the lens of his own perception. And he's going to think, okay, is it novel? Is it something we already have? Is it designed efficiently? Does it accomplish fun? These are the things that this inventor goes through whenever they're designing their own products. Whereas the kid, they don't think about this stuff. They just think, do they like it? And really, they can't even explain why. If you take a software app, a web app, and you bring that to a dev, They're going to nitpick every detail that doesn't even matter towards the end result. So they're going to talk about the maybe time to first paint or some absolute unnecessary thing, right? Me personally, I don't know the first thing when it comes to cars. I know more about the Cars movie than I do about cars. Bring me a car, all I'm basing it on is, do I like the look of the car and do I like the feel of the drive? That's all I care about. The point he's making here is, expert, they're suddenly fit to give advice. And oftentimes that advice is not even what matters to the end user. The article continues. So he has a picture here. I don't think this would be the average user's perspective. Even in the age of AI, the average person doesn't think about the nitty-gritty stuff like this. And my proof on this is the fact that we see a lot of websites that are just AI garbage. And it looks pretty much similar to what you're seeing in this page here. Nobody's going to release an app unless they feel like it's at least somewhat good, right? Why would you release a public app if you didn't feel like it looked good? So definitely there are people that think this kind of a thing looks good. And I really am hard pressed to believe they would go to this nitty gritty. But anyway, so I do disagree a little bit on that point there. A non-mathematician can't even speak the language of mathematics. But in a lot of fields, people can evaluate your work with their own senses. They don't need any other apparatus. I see how software is turning more from what I experience with math to what I'm experiencing with marketing. It is now possible to vibe code your own SaaS instead of paying someone $50 a month for theirs. And once anyone can build software is something everyone feels qualified to judge. This I 100% agree with. I've seen this personally at work. People coming to me with tools that they designed. And these people never had any background in software. A common case I see this with is support roles and PMs. These people, they had very little coding experience prior. Now they're whipping out dashboard tools. They're whipping out debug scripts. Like all apps and tools are being made by people that at one point would have never even come close. Now that they have the taste of what it's like to build, right? They've gotten a piece of the chicken. They know what it's like to build these apps now. It's not at all unrealistic to believe they're going to start having an opinion on things. I've seen this all around tech. We have this thing, especially with YouTubers, I've seen, where they will be confidently wrong about things that they have no experience in. And they'll one article or they'll find one thing and feel like they're all of a sudden an expert. And it kind of alludes to the idea that humans are extremely egotistical. And I'm no saint in this. Here's the thing. If you started playing Forza Horizon 6, I don't know if you played that. I don't know a goddamn thing about cars. I really don't. But when I started playing this game and I start to really feel like I can comment on the control of a car, like there's something I truly should not comment on as a Forza Horizon 6 player. But your brain starts to feel like it knows when it's experienced something. Pre-Horizon 6, I could never comment on things like handling, brake actuation, throttle sensitivity, like things that I now feel in a game sense, in a way has translated to my real life feeling over cars. Like I'm in my car, I can feel the car a bit better than when I didn't play Forza Horizon 6. It is a weird concept and feeling, but it is a very human feeling. Once we experience something and we feel like we have experienced something, it often translates to us feeling though we have an opinion on it. The article is getting at here. This is where two variables interact: how hard it is to enter a field and how easily outsiders can evaluate the work. When both shift, barriers drop, visibility rises, respect collapses. I see it like this. There are two variables. How high and low is barrier to entry? How much people can externally judge your work? This graph here. To be honest, I don't think this is a very readable graph. Just as, these were hard to get into, had less people that were opinionated, but now it's starting to shift. Everything is starting to become everyone's a critic because it's that much easier to get into, especially when it comes to software. And it kind of alludes to what I was saying earlier with Forza Horizon. Truly, I have no meaning to comment on cars, and I still don't today. But there's certain aspects that I feel I have felt enough through the video game that I can comment on in real life, right? How hard it is to turn corners and the weight of the car. You really feel that in the game. It does not mean I'm an expert of it. I'm a seasoned veteran software engineer, somebody who's been developing software for 10 plus years. Before AI, if they had an app, like let's say their app, it's like Stack Overflow, you might see some comments about the design of the app, things like that. Nowadays, you just see that everywhere because everyone has a feel. Everyone's tasted what it's like to build an app. They feel as though they have some kind of skin in the game where they can comment on your app. And so as software moves into everyone's a critic territory, pay will compress toward what other creative fields already look like. Writers, designers, and marketers all have wider pay distributions because the barrier to entry is low and the work is visible. anyone can try it, everyone has an opinion, and the only proven best command a premium. To stand out, you need something beyond software engineer on your resume. A specialization, a track record, a reputation. The bullshistas will multiply, but so will the premium on genuinely excellent work. And we're seeing this today. There are certain companies that still offer a lot, like Meta. I think the median salary there is at over 500K. A company like Meta still offers a lot for their engineers, but you're seeing it's a pretty hard company to get into. And people get laid off all the time. If you're getting this amount, it's because you're cream of the crop and you're gonna have to work your ass off to keep this position. And here he has this graph here. You can see the multiplier from what is considered a top premium for, top 10% of software developers are earning over 2.6 times the average. And this will continue to deviate, right? Especially with how software is now, an average Joe software engineer can really perform at what was a 10x position. Now, obviously, AI is not perfect. It's going to produce bugs. It's going to have issues. AI isn't perfect. But guess what? Neither were software engineers. Software engineers have always produced bugs, poorly readable, maintainable code. This was never something that AI just all of a sudden is producing and we didn't have before, right? I see this argument all the time about how, all these AI code bases are going to be a mess in the future. Dude, have you looked at the code bases we had prior to AI? It was always bad, right? We've always had this issue. But I would say nowadays, the average Joe developer can produce well-written code without trying too hard. Anyway, going on with the article, good enough marketers in San Francisco really get paid a lot. Let's actually look into this. Top end of marketing salaries in San Francisco Bay Area, $450,000 to $800,000. So I imagine this is the cream of the crop, CMOs. Yeah, these are the people that are literally at the top of their company. So the average marketer is not making that. But this kind of feeds into his argument. This is him saying, hey, this is how it is in marketing, and this is how it's going to be in software. You're going to have these people that are making absolutely bonkers money, but this is way an outlier. This is not going to happen for the average person. I'm not saying that I'm good. I remember he's a marketer. I still have tons of things to learn. What I'm saying is that my offers have grown like crazy. I would never guess what numbers I can get to. And to me, this is a good thing. This would be a positive beacon if you're in software where you see, hey, if I put the work in with your development skills and it can translate to being in that top echelon. Right? I see a lot of people complaining about, one's going to take my job. I'm just going to get laid off, whatever. No, there's going to be people that don't get laid off. Let's say they cut 80% of the workforce. Guess what? There's still 20% left. And that 20% is going to get paid a pretty dime because if they lose those people, it's integral. These engineers are going to get a lot of money. Implication 2. Optionality changes the commitment to software products. Optionality does specific things to markets, and that is people stop settling. And there's one example we all hear way too much, dating market. When dating apps appeared, people swiping around quickly realized how many options they had. I hear people say they swiped through thousands of people on the apps, but haven't found anyone they would like or anyone who would like them. Why would you settle for something good enough if you know that there are thousands of other options and one might be the perfect match? Now, I don't believe that this relates to software in the same way, because the reality is, right, you could have 3 web apps that do the exact same thing, which you have today. These 3 apps serve the same purpose, but unlike the dating market, we have track history. If you go on Tinder or a dating app, all you're getting is the surface level value. You're not getting the full picture of their history. With the app market, there is a history there. If I go on Google and I search Calculator App 1, I get to see what has gone into that app. I get to see people commenting on the app on different websites. I get to look at its history, like how long it's been around. Oftentimes there's a landing page, that kind of surface level. But see, clear about how everyone has a different perspective. This guy, as a marketer, he's not thinking about the entire picture outside of the landing page, which is very important here. The dating market, you can't just go and Google somebody's name and get their entire dating history. But I can search an app and get, for the most part, a very good history of the complaints that users have, bug reports, things like that. You can get a lot more from software. What's my point here? Well, if you're somebody today, let's say you want to come out and you want to build Calculator App 4. It might seem like a really daunting task, but believe it or not, you have a chance. Even if you were to do the exact same thing that these other calculator apps do, there's still a chance you can break through the market. And that's through factors such as hitting the target audience. As we talked about earlier, Discord wasn't doing anything crazy from our prior apps, but it hit a different target audience. That is the hardest part about this. You have to understand what the target audience wants and what they're thinking about. You also have longevity. And this is pretty broad, but basically this includes time being up and persistence. There's apps that I use, they get updated all the time. Pretty much every day, if not every week, the apps get updated. And you see that. As a user, you see that, right? Every time I see Pi, which is the terminal app, get an update, it's signal to my brain that this is a proactively built app that is constantly evolving and constantly improving. And people value this. They do. And so going back to the article, he compared dating apps. I don't see it that way. Continues, the same psychology applies to software. When there were 3 project management tools, you picked one. When there are 300 and you can vibe code your own in an afternoon, commitment evaporates. Again, going back to the idea I mentioned earlier about longevity and the persistence of updates, can't do is take in years and years of customer feedback and fixes and just whip it up in 2 seconds. Great apps are built over time through revision. Every single release that comes out, customers give their feedback. The dev team takes that in. The article continues. Barry Schwartz called this the paradox of choice. It's human nature that more options lead to less satisfaction. I believe there is an ideal range of software alternatives that make you commit the most. There's only one solution. You might find it suspicious, or it can be because the market is too early and the solution might not be good yet. I'm not sure what he means by this. Few alternatives are ideal, but if there are too many, you may start looking for something that is just for you and have more difficulty finding it. I think what he's saying here is if there's not enough options, you're skeptical, and if there's too many options, you get lost in the weeds. This is a pretty broad stroke. I think there are certain cases like this, but it also completely disregards the aspect of this part here, building your own. You know, I wanted to build my own WinRAR or 7-zip. I end up spending a lot of money and a lot of time doing just that. Whereas I could just download an alternative and I'm done. I don't have to spend a bunch of money and time vibe coding it. Because I don't know if you've ever vibe coded an app before, but it never is done in one prompt. It always takes hours of back and forth refinement before I'm happy with it. And even then, you're constantly evolving it even beyond there. Kind of alluded to earlier about how you can't take the revisions and the customer feedback over years. It applies to this as well. I don't know how much feedback WinRAR and 7-zip have gone through. It's years and years and years. They refined it to the point where it is now at the least complaining state possible. Implication 3, the middle class of software products will disappear. The previous leads to something interesting. SaaS is about to get App Store treatment, and it will start to resemble a power law system. When software was hard to build, companies survived by being the only ones who could do X. When anyone can vibe code an alternative over a weekend, the mid-sized company charging $50 a month for a simple tool has no moat left. Product becomes a commodity. The companies in the middle, those with high overhead but no unique aggregator power, get squeezed from both sides. They are too expensive to compete with a free AI-generated tool and too small to compete with the network effects of a giant. I agree with this to some extent. SaaS as a business model is definitely impacted here. However, there is something to be said about keeping up a SaaS long term. It's one thing to vibe code a SaaS and then sell it right then and there, but there's way more that goes into this. We're not at a point yet where the AI can truly hands off the infrastructure side. You have to go into SaaS or whatever cloud provider. You have to put a little bit of manual effort into allocating resources to keep the website up and running. Not to mention, as I discussed earlier, target audience. Getting an audience is extremely, extremely hard to do, and it always has been. The most powerful way to get people to use something is through word of mouth. Odds are likely a lot of the stuff that you use on your daily basis is something that at one point somebody mentioned. It's extremely rare that you use something that nobody in your life has talked about or nothing you've seen or watched had mentioned. And pre-AI, it was pretty tough still, right? We've had so many options for SaaS prior to AI. It was hard to get your market fit. You can send ads on YouTube or Reddit or whatever. There's a saying, I don't know the exact number, but they basically say somebody has to see a product a lot of times before they even consider buying it. That was true before AI and that's true now. And so when I read this article and I see it saying has no moat left, I kind of disagree with that. Yes, if you're a new SaaS today, it's definitely harder to get up and running and get into that position. Strategies that you use to get there haven't really changed much. Right? You can brute force it with ads, but you're going to end up at a dead end. You'll find out that the best way to do it is through word of mouth. And so if you luck out and befriend somebody that is big in the industry, they would promote your product. Yes, the level of entry is lower, but the level it takes to become at a place where you are not easily destroyable hasn't changed. It still takes the same amount of effort and it still takes the same amount of time. The article continues, since the cost of creation is near zero, we will see a Cambrian explosion of hyper-niche disposable software. A freelancer vibe codes their own invoicing app. A teacher vibe codes their own grading tool. These are not businesses, they are personal utilities, and there will be millions of them. Absolutely agree to this. In a sea of infinite vibe coded apps, the only things that matter are trust, distribution, and identity. Users will flock to a few mega aggregators because these platforms provide the infrastructure and the verified ecosystem that individual apps lack. This is exactly what I was alluding to earlier. This part is really hard to achieve, and it's always been really hard to achieve. You might vibe code your own note-taking app, but you still need to run it on someone's cloud, authenticate through someone else's identity layer, and be discoverable through someone's ecosystem. Exactly. This part has not changed with AI. Implication 4, if you want to win, sell services, not products. Right now, for every $1 company that's spent on software, they spend about $6 on services. The entire SaaS playbook was about capturing that software dollar, but when AI can do the work itself, the real opportunity is capturing services dollar as software margin. Think about it this way. A company might spend $10K a year on accounting software and $120K on accountants close the books. The next big company won't sell better accounting software. It'll just close the book. So instead of providing a software as the middleman, this is no longer enough. Right? It used to be where you could just provide a software tool that lets somebody the power of doing something, and that was all it takes. But now we need more than that. We need some automation in there. So now it adds automation, service. Think about TurboTax. You don't pay for TurboTax because it's a piece of software that lets you interact with your tax filing. You pay because it files your taxes. It doesn't print out the output and tell you, hey, you got to go to the IRS with this piece of paper and file it. It does it right there for you. Pre-AI, you might have been able to get away with this flow before, where you're just providing the software as a middleman and you're getting some money out of it. Now, it's like you need to go the extra step. You need to enter the data for them. In pre-AI, and even now, usually there's an API layer that you're interacting with. Software, it interacts with an API of some sort. It's like for ID verification. The service really is this API, right? You might be the front layer for that API, but there's always been some kind of API that went into any usable, profitable app. I wouldn't say that's AI specific. This changes what it means to be an expert too. A brilliant tax specialist doesn't need to be hired by one company anymore. They can sell their specific expertise to 200 clients because AI handles everything except judgment calls. You don't need to do the junior tasks. You don't need to be in an office, and you don't need to be the best at one specific thing and package that as an outcome. The job as we know it, a salary, a desk, a mix of important and mundane tasks, that structure exists because companies needed warm bodies for the mundane parts. When AI handles the mundane, what's left is the judgment, brand, proven track record, experience, and network. And judgment doesn't need to be full-time. It doesn't even need to be employed. It can be an agency of one. Now, I think this kind of discredits the mundane that still exists. We still have to prompt the AI. Somebody has to write the prompt. Somebody has to back and forth with the AI. As I mentioned before, it's never a one-time prompt. So pre-AI, you might have been doing boilerplate code. Post-AI, you're doing boilerplate prompting. You still need to prompt the damn AI at some point. Even if you're doing something that you've done 100 times, something has to enact the call to the AI tool. There's still some mundane here. It's just less time consuming. But you still need a warm body there. You still need to pay somebody for that. If you're somebody who's making, like in the area and you're making over 100K, odds are the job that you're doing is not purely code. There's a lot more to it. Software engineer jobs are not just about coding. You have to interact with customers, sometimes, depending on your role. You have to interact with other teams, cross-functional teams. You have to drive the decisions. As you get further along, you're having to make actual choices that impact the company's success. But this is a role that really was few and far between anyway. These were the people that you hired on contract or really weren't paying too much. The average software engineer was not in this camp, believe it or not. There was boilerplate code that they had to write up, absolutely, but that wasn't why they were hired. If that was why they were hired, they could have just hired some dude in India to do this part, right? It's not exactly needing of somebody who understands the full architecture or the rest of the team. This part here, this is what you're getting your salary for. So let's just be clear there. What's the conclusion of this article? The evolution of software is now following the same path that other low barrier fields have followed for decades. If you're a software engineer, welcome to what non-technical people have been experiencing for years. Get ready for less experienced people giving you advice, evaluating your work, and second-guessing your decisions. Your options are be the absolute best, the far right of the power law, or combine strong technical skill with something else. Design, distribution, brand, domain expertise. The worst position is being merely competent at software and nothing else. Again, I really don't think this changed after AI. Good software engineers weren't just able to write up syntax. They were able to make decisions that impacted the future of the product. This takes more than just being competent at software. This takes being a forward-thinking, market-understanding person and having experience working with other engineers and understanding the lay of the land. I do think we're going to see a lot of people that give advice they shouldn't. I think people were doing that even before. I think you'll see a lot of younger engineers at companies speaking out sooner, which I actually think is a good thing. Pre-AI, the dev that just joined could never comment on what's possible. Nowadays, they can, because that new engineer that just joined the company can very quickly ramp up and actually begin producing useful code. Although this article is kind of giving it a negative tone about less experienced people giving advice, I actually see this as a good thing. We'll have to be better about kind of what's good and what's bad. Young engineers are more likely to give bad advice, absolutely. But I think there are some aspects to this that are actually a good thing. You'll see younger engineers actually making an impact sooner. If you're not a software engineer, you can build things now. But code was never the hard part. The hard part is taste, distribution, and making something people actually want. That hasn't changed. 100%. 150,000%. Coding literally was never the hard part, ever. You're building a company, stop thinking about the software as a product. Think about what the outcome your customer actually pays for and sell that. The tool is a commodity. The work is the moat. Again, this is how it was pre-AI. This is how it is post-AI. Are there differences in the entry point? Yes. Are there differences in the exit point? No. People that are going to make it in software, we're going to make it pre-AI. Because there's more factors than just the software itself. And this vision of visioning the outcome your customer pays for, this is something that you needed before AI. You always needed this. The barrier to entry for software has fallen. It's not coming back up. The question isn't whether that changes everything. It's whether you'll be the one doing the changing or the one being changed. This is a really good article. I agree with a lot of it. And that to me is a good article. I'll put a link in the description